Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Thank you for all coming out to hear me and Professor Yan discuss the international situation today. It's a great honor to be up on the stage with my old friend, Professor Yan. As you've been told, this is the third time that we've engaged with each other to discuss our similar views and different views about how international politics works. What I'd like to do here is just lay out my basic theory of international politics, just tell you how I think the world works, and I'm sure that many of you know the essentials of my argument, and then talk some about international order. My basic view of international politics is that it's all about a competition for power. At its root, great powers care enormously about the balance of power. And the reason they care greatly about the balance of power is that it's the best way to survive in the international system. And you always want to keep in mind that survival has to be the principal goal of any state. Because if you don't survive, you can't pursue any other goals. This is one of the problems I have with international economics or economics in general. Economics pays no attention to survival. Economics is mainly concerned with prosperity. Prosperity is nice, but the fact is you can't become prosperous if you don't survive. And economists don't pay attention to survival. Now, why is survival such a tricky matter in international politics? It's very simple. It's because, number one, there's no higher authority in the international system. There's no night watchman. There's no ultimate arbiter. To put it in Hobbes's terminology, there's no Leviathan. And in the international system, where you have all these states, some of those states are really powerful. You all know about the United States, and of course China as well now. So you have powerful states, and you can never be certain of the intentions of those states. And the reason that you can't be certain of the intentions of those states are that intentions are something you can't see. Capabilities you can measure. During the Cold War, I was in the Air Force. I was in Air Force intelligence, and we used to look at the Soviet threat. We could always determine what Soviet capabilities looked like, but intentions were very hard to discern. You couldn't get inside and see what was happening inside the brain of Nikita Khrushchev or Brezhnev or whoever was running the Soviet Union. The intentions were just very hard to discern. Now, if you don't think that's true, and you think it is relatively easy to figure out a state's intentions now, my trump card is to say you certainly cannot figure out future intentions. You cannot tell me what the intentions of the United States will be in 10 years, 15 years, or what the intentions of China will be in 10 years or 15 years. So uncertainty about the intentions of powerful states is something that's going to concern you greatly if you're a state in the system. And again, if you get into trouble, if a powerful state has malign or evil intentions towards you and comes after you, and you look to a higher authority to rescue you, there's nobody there. You're lost. It's why we say in the realist world of international politics that it is a self-help world. As my mother used to say when I was a little boy, God helps those who help themselves. This is very important to understand. How do you survive in an anarchic system, in a system where there's no higher authority? And the answer is very simple. You want to be very powerful. You want to maximize your power. You want to be, in my lexicon, a hegemon. Because that's the best way to survive. You don't necessarily want to be a hegemon because you have naturally aggressive tendencies. You want to be a hegemon because in an anarchic system, a system where there's no higher authority, where there are powerful states, and where you cannot be certain of the intentions of those other states, it pays to be really powerful. It pays to be a hegemon. Now, to be a bit more specific about this, my argument is that you can only be a regional hegemon. You want to be a regional hegemon, number one. And number two, you want to make sure that no other state is a regional hegemon. The ideal situation is to be the only regional hegemon in the international system. And the United States of America is the only regional hegemon in the system. And the United States, unsurprisingly, and this is exactly what my theory predicts, the United States does not tolerate peer regional hegemons. In the 20th century, there were 4 countries that attempted to establish regional hegemony: Imperial Germany, Imperial Japan, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union. And the United States played a key role in preventing all 4 of those countries from achieving regional hegemony. Again, the United States does not tolerate regional hegemony. Moreover, you want to understand that the United States went to great lengths to establish regional hegemony. As I like to argue, the United States started out as 13 weak colonies strung out along the Atlantic Ocean. And over the course of the 19th century, we marched across North America and we created a really powerful state. And then we told the European great powers, this is the famous Monroe Doctrine, we told the European great powers, we're not powerful enough to throw you out of the hemisphere now, but we will eventually be powerful enough, and when we do reach that point, we're going to throw you out and you're not welcome back. Distant great powers are not allowed in the Western Hemisphere. That's verboten, as the Soviets found out during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So again, you see what the United States did. The United States worked hard from the beginning to establish regional hegemony, to make sure that it dominated the Western Hemisphere. That was in the 19th century. And then, as I told you, in the 20th century, we went to great lengths to make sure we did not have a peer regional hegemon. That's my basic theory. Now, how does this apply to the world today? Well, most of you were born in the unipolar moment. The unipolar moment basically ran from 1991 to 2017. And in the unipolar moment, this kind of logic didn't apply because there was only one great power on the planet. It was the United States. It was a regional hegemon. Some would argue it was a global hegemon, right? But it was incredibly powerful. China was weak during the unipolar moment, and there was no chance you were going to try to achieve regional hegemony. But what happened is China became economically powerful. China became an economic powerhouse. Good for China, not good for the United States. But China becomes an economic powerhouse, and it begins to translate that economic might into military might. And it begins to think about dominating Asia. And I want to make clear, if I were the National Security Advisor, I'd tell him, we want to dominate East Asia. We want to drive the Americans out beyond the first island chain. We want to drive the Americans out beyond the second island chain. And we want to make sure we dominate East Asia. We want to be the most powerful country in East Asia. We do not want to suffer another century of national humiliation. You all understand that this is what happens in international politics when you're weak. When you're weak, the more powerful great powers prey on you. Study NATO expansion if you have any doubt about that. Russia was weak in the 1990s, and it was weak in the first decade and a half of the 2000s. What did the United States do? We shoved NATO expansion down their throat in 1999. We shoved NATO expansion down their throat in 2004. And then after 2008, we tried to shove NATO expansion down their throat again. regarding Ukraine and regarding Georgia. That's how the United States operates. It was powerful, Russia was weak. That's what happens when you're weak. And the Chinese surely understand that. So you want to be powerful. Again, you want to be a regional hegemon. And you can see China heading in that direction. Most Chinese will deny this, of course, which is the smart thing to do, but the Americans are very suspicious. So, what is happening here in the world today? I'd say basically two things are happening. Number one, China is on its way to developing enough economic and military capability to think seriously about dominating Asia. And it should want to dominate Asia. It should want to imitate the United States. And oh, by the way, the Chinese are also developing power projection capability. They're developing a blue water navy, just like the United States. Do I blame the Chinese? Not one bit. But what do the Americans think about this? I told you, the Americans don't tolerate peer competitors. And you want to understand, this is basically a zero-sum game. The more powerful China gets, the weaker the United States gets. The more powerful the United States gets, the weaker China gets. So you're involved in this intense security competition. And as you all know, this security competition, underlying